probably met other or heard of other Christian people who've taken mission trips or who've been generous with their time and their money to go somewhere else and bless some other people. And if you haven't met anyone who's been on a mission trip, I bet you've met Christian people who are using their time and money to volunteer locally somewhere. And maybe you've done some of that yourself. Maybe you've served in a soup kitchen somewhere. Maybe you've volunteered at a homeless shelter. Maybe you've fundraised for a charity or done something like that. There's so many things that Christian people do where they are generous with their time and their money. Why do Christians do such crazy, generous things? We have a statement that drives everything that we do here at Tide. It's the statement that stands behind me every morning. It's on the cards at the front of the church. It talks about who we want to be as a church. And it says that we are people who are devoted to Jesus, living our lives following Jesus' example and teaching wherever we are, no matter the cost. If people ask you what this church is about, this is there's a lot of ways you could describe it, but this is our sort of one statement that says, this is who we're trying to be. That's kind of the headline, and we have three statements that sit under that describe how we're going to get ourselves there. We say that we will provide an opportunity for people to experience Jesus through worship, communion, and community. Every week that you come here, we're going to be doing that. That drives everything that happens in this space. We say that we will focus on clear and practical Bible teaching and preaching. Again, you will see that every week in one shape or form. It drives all of what we do in this space. And thirdly, we say that we will empower people, all of us, to serve our community and the world. Those three statements drive everything we do on a Sunday morning, everything that happens midweek, all of our communications, everything is about those three things. And then we have these 6 behaviours that sit under that, because it's not just about words on a page, it's about who we're becoming as people. We believe, as we said in the interview, that we believe that for a Christian person, life is a constant journey of transformation with Jesus. And so we say for us there are 6 behaviours that we believe, that we hope that we are working toward being true for every person who's a part of Tide. It's these 6. We say we want to be people who are about love, loving God, loving one another, who live and embrace grace. And Tom and Ree talked about their experience of that word and that idea while they were away. Generosity, joy, hospitality and inclusivity and faith. And we will unapologetically hold this stuff up all the time and say, that's who we're trying to be, because if we say all the time here, as I say all the time here, the church isn't a building or an organisation. It's not like a company. A church is a community of people. You don't go to church. You're not a part of a church. You are the church. And so Tide Church is us. Tide Church isn't this building. It's not any of this stuff that you see up the front. Tide Church is us. It's us as people. Tide Church is who we are. Tide Church is how we live, it's what we do, it's what we say. If someone asks you what Tide Church is like, we are the answer, right? Tide Church is us. And one of the things on that list is generosity. Tom and Ree were generous in their decision to go to Bali. Now, lots of people who follow Jesus are generous with their time and with their money. And if you ask lots of Christian people, they would say, yeah, generosity is a good thing. But let's be real, there are lots of people who don't believe Jesus is real at all, who would still describe themselves as generous, right? Yeah. What is it about being generous as a Christian that's different from being generous as a non-Christian, right? What is it that's different about the kind of generosity that exists in a community like this from the generosity that is in the world all around us every day? Christians are generous because God is generous. That's the difference. The why behind our generosity is different. Christians are generous because God is generous. Maybe you've never thought about it like this. Wherever you think about God, maybe you've never thought about it like this before. But generosity is actually a core part of who God is. Generosity is, I don't know if it's the right word, it's foundational to who God is and who Jesus is. Generosity is at the heart of what it means to be Christian. Now, I talk all the time in this church about Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2. Because those two chapters, literally the very first two chapters in our Bible, they present to us a picture of who God is and how God has designed humanity, how God has designed you and me to be. There's so much that we read in those first two chapters that are the foundation, that are the base to everything else that happens in Christianity, everything else that happens in the Bible, and everything else that happens in this church and in our lives. And it's right at the beginning, it's in those first two chapters of the Bible that we see this abundant generosity of God. I mean, in those first two chapters, we see that God creates all kinds of plants, it describes. It says that God creates trees with fruit on them. There are waters, in Genesis it says, that are teeming with living creatures. Birds fill the sky, and Genesis 1:22 says that God blessed them. And he said, bless them, meaning all of those things that he's created. He blessed them and he said, be fruitful and multiply and fill the waters of the sea. Let the birds multiply on earth. And then God creates people. God creates humanity. He creates the first people and he says the same thing to them. A couple of verses on, Genesis 1:28 says, God blessed them, talking about the first people, and said to them, be fruitful and multiply. Same language. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and every creature that crawls on the ground. And then God said to them, behold, that's Bible language for pay attention to what I'm about to say next. I have given you every seed-bearing plant on the face of all the earth and every tree whose fruit contains seed, they will be yours for food. Friends, can you hear the language of abundance and generosity in the creation story? Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth. I've given you everything, they will be yours. The first picture we have of God is a picture of an abundant and generous God. Now, lots of you know how the story goes after those first two chapters. Fast forward a couple of thousand years, and humanity and the world is in a mess. Ironically, in a mess because people didn't trust the generosity and the abundance of God, and they decided to try and get stuff for themselves and to hold on things for themselves, and we become greedy and self-centered. The Bible calls that sin. And into that messed up world, the same abundant and generous God stands in the middle of that mess. And God loved the world so much that he gave. That he gave his one and only Son. I don't know if you've ever thought about it this way. A lot of people haven't. It's okay if you haven't. A lot of people have never thought about the fact that Jesus is a gift. Jesus is a gift from God to all of humanity. Not just to the people who saw him 2,000 years ago, to all humanity for all time. Jesus is a gift from a generous God given to people. And understanding the generosity and the abundance of God is what makes Christians generous to the world around them. That makes sense? I mean, if generosity is a part of who Jesus is, and if my life is about following Jesus and becoming like him, then I must also be on a journey toward generosity. My life must also be on a journey toward becoming more and more generous, because my life is on a journey to becoming more and more like Jesus. That's what this statement's about, that we are people who are devoted to Jesus, to following Jesus. That's the bit I'm trying to get to in the middle there. Here's the point. I'm generous because Jesus is generous. That's what makes generosity for a Christian person fundamentally different. It's fundamentally a different basis for generosity than for the world around us, because there's lots of people out there who are generous. But if you ask them, they won't tell you this straight up. They're generous because generosity makes them look good. Right? They're generous because generosity makes us look good to the world around us. They're generous because generosity makes us feel good inside us. We feel good when we donate to a charity. We feel good when we serve at a soup kitchen, and there's nothing wrong with that. But make no mistake, Jesus gave up everything for you. I mean, look at what his generosity cost him. Jesus loved people, all people, you and me people, so much that he gave up everything. He gave up his literal life. Like, that's generous, right? There's no greater generosity than to give up your life for someone else. That's the model, that's the example, that's the person of Jesus. And if followers of Jesus are trying to be like Jesus, that's where we're headed, right? Oh, ironically, if you've been here for the last few weeks, we've been talking about worship, and we've been talking about the sacrifice part of worship, the sacrifice, the giving part of worship in response to what God's done to us. Generosity is what that looks like in real life, right? That's how that sort of idea about worship actually grounds itself in my day-to-day living. It's in generosity that says, I will give up everything, not just because it's going to make me look good, not just because I'm going to feel good, but because I'm following the example of the most generous human being that ever walked the face of the earth, the person of Jesus. Christians are generous because we're trying to be like the most generous person that's ever walked the face of the earth, the person of Jesus. That's why generosity is on that list of behaviours that we have as a church. That's why we want generosity to be true of every person who's a part of the church here. And without apology, that's why we make so many opportunities in this church for you and for me and for us to give. Not to give sort of from our leftovers, not to give just if you're a wealthy person here, but for all of us to give. And sometimes we use the word to give sacrificially, right? Which is a way of saying to give sort of when it hurts, to give so that it's a sacrifice for us. Not because we're trying to be sort of hard done by and look at us, but because that's the way that Jesus gave. That's the way that God is, and that's the example we're following, right? I mean, that's why we have locally, we have this partnership with Coolock House. If you're new here, you might not know this, but we have a partnership with you've never heard of it. It's an unbranded house in the back streets of Christie's Beach that provides accommodation for young mums, and by young we mean for teenage mums who've got little babies who are homeless. Most of them are homeless because of domestic violence. They've been in relationships that they've had to flee from, and they've literally fled with nothing, holding a baby. They have no money. Most of them have no car. They have no house. They have no place to go. And Coolock House takes those women in and supports them and helps them to get back on their feet. And we have a partnership with them. That's why at Christmas last year, us together, we donated over $5,000 to put security gates on the front of that house so that those women not just had a place to live, but a secure place to live. Now, I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but here's the reality of that situation. There were lots of people in this place who spent more money on those women at Christmas time than they did on their own family. Right? That's what Christian generosity does to people. That's why on Mother's Day this year, we gave hundreds of dollars to craft supplies for those women. Once again, there were people in this church who spent more time and money making Mother's Day special for those mums than they did for their own mums. We've donated mattresses, we've renovated their backyards, we've set up kitchen supplies for those young mums so that when they leave Coolock House, they've got bags of pots and pans and whatever so that they can cook and feed their own, themselves and their babies. That's why we do all of that. It's out of this desire to be generous because Jesus is generous. That's why we have people, and again, some of you know this, we have people in this church every week who are part of a couple of bread runs that we do. Every week there are people in this church who give up an evening a week and they go to a local bakery. They fill their cars smell like a bakery, which is not a bad thing. They fill their cars with bags and bags and bags of the leftover bread, and then they drive around the local suburb. We've got a list of people in need. They drive around the local suburb, they knock on their doors, and they say, here's a bag of bread for you. That's it. They get in their car and they drive to the next place and the next place until their car is just full of crumbs and they've blessed a bunch of people. We've got people who do that every week. If you want to be a part of that, you can see Roz or a couple others who are involved in that. Every week we've got teams. They do it on a rotation basis, so you go about once a month. That's why. So we've got Coolock House. That's why we do that. And that's why we've got this partnership, this relationship in Bali. So they mentioned a couple of times, we've sort of got an informal, there's no one signed anything, but we're an informal relationship with Gully Church, where we've committed to partner with them and to support the work that we will now do together in Bali. That's why Tom and Ree went to Bali. That's why, and lots of you know this, we've been talking about, so Bali's one island in Indonesia, Zumba is another island in Indonesia. It's why we're supporting a local church there, a church that most of us will never meet, a local indigenous church on the island of Zumba that are building an orphanage for kids on that island to save them from child sex trafficking. Because this local church knows that kids without homes and without parents on the island of Zumba, they know what happens to those kids. And so the pastor of this church, who's not a wealthy guy, he's not a famous guy, you'll never read a book from him, you'll never hear his story or his name, he says, I want to build an orphanage, a home, a school, or whatever, to bring these kids in and to keep these kids safe, to educate them or whatever. And so already this church, you people, out of your generosity, have donated thousands and thousands of dollars to build this building, which will be sort of accommodation, school, a bunch of things for these kids. And we're just getting started. We're going to do some more of that. And there's already people, Ree and others, already people who are talking about maybe we could turn this place into a quiz night venue or a dinner venue or do something else and, raise some more money. We will continue to do that.